Thanks for tuning in to Crazy Mango Stories. Give a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell for more betrayal stories. It was a quiet evening, one of those still moments where everything seemed too perfect. The house felt unnaturally large and empty, just the faint ticking of a clock echoing through the halls. I was sipping whiskey, a nightly ritual that had become more comforting lately. Business trips and late nights were a regular part of my life now, so the silence didn't bother me anymore. What did, however, was the unread email sitting in my inbox, a notification from Jack, my private investigator. I clicked it. A short message appeared. You might want to sit down for this one. Attached was a video file. My breath caught as I opened it, the resolution blurring for a second before sharpening into something that turned my blood cold. Linda, my Linda, was in a motel room, a sleazy, low-lit place that screamed cheapness. She wasn't alone. Several men, faceless to me in this first moment, crowded around her, laughing, touching, pulling her into them like she was the prize in some grotesque game. The bile rose in my throat, but I forced myself to watch. I had to. The caption Jack left on the screen lingered mockingly. Don't watch for too long, or it'll make you sick. Sick. I wasn't sure if I was going to throw up or if I was about to break the screen in front of me. I paused the video. Sickness wasn't the only thing boiling inside me. I stared at the frozen image on the screen, my fingers tightening around the glass of whiskey until I thought it might shatter. The cheap motel room in the video felt like an insult in itself, an ugly, degrading place that made the betrayal all the more revolting. Linda, who always talked about elegance, sophistication, and class, now looked like nothing more than a piece of trash discarded in that room. And those men, they were faceless, just shadows that turned her into their plaything. My wife, the woman I promised to love and protect, had done this. I pressed play again. Every second that followed drove the knife deeper. Linda was laughing, carefree in a way I hadn't seen in years. Not with me, not anymore. I clenched my jaw as one of the men grabbed her, pulling her close like she was some prize he'd won. The others followed suit, surrounding her, touching her like they owned her. She didn't pull away. No hesitation. She wanted this. I forced myself to watch it all. The scene was longer than I expected, and each frame felt like an eternity. The anger inside me bubbled into something darker, something colder. It wasn't just rage. It was betrayal so deep it left a hollow pit where my heart used to be. I had suspected for a while things had changed between us over the past year, but I had no idea it had spiraled this far. When the video finally ended, I stared at the blank screen, my mind racing. I couldn't get the image of her out of my head. That damn laugh, the way her body moved like she had no shame, like our marriage was some distant memory she'd buried. My stomach twisted. I was humiliated, degraded. My wife had turned into something I didn't recognize, something ugly. And for what? Some cheap thrills in a filthy motel. I drained the rest of my whiskey, the burn doing little to numb the fury growing inside me. I couldn't just let this slide. Not this time. Hiring Jack had been a precaution, a way to confirm my worst fears. Now that I had the truth, I knew what I had to do. My phone buzzed. It was Jack, following up with a message, "Let me know if you need anything else. We can take this further if you want." Take it further? The thought flashed through my mind before I could stop it. What exactly did that mean? I knew Jack had connections, dark connections. Private investigators didn't just gather information. They could make things happen if the price was right. I stared at the screen for a moment, my pulse quickening. Was this where I was headed? Could I really go down that path? I tossed the phone on the table, rubbing my temples. The temptation was there, gnawing at me. A twisted sense of justice, of revenge. She had destroyed what we had, and now I needed to make her feel the same kind of pain. My hand hovered over my phone again. I started typing, "Do you know the number of a hitman?" I hesitated for a second, but then hit send. Let her laugh with those men now. I stared at the message on my phone. The words, "Do you know the number of a hitman?" glowing on the screen, mocking me. My thumb hovered over the delete button, but I didn't press it. There was a part of me, a dark, festering part, that wanted to leave it there. Maybe as a threat. Maybe as a reminder that I wasn't going to just sit here and take this. The room felt suffocating all of a sudden, the silence pressing in from all sides. I stood up, pacing the length of the living room, my thoughts spinning in a dozen directions. I imagined all the ways this could go. Did I really want Linda dead? Was that where I was heading? Could I look her in the eyes one more time and still feel anything other than hatred? I didn't even know anymore. Till the thought of her lying in some shallow grave, never to laugh in that infuriating way again, made me feel something. It's about relief, not satisfaction, but maybe peace. A twisted, sick sense of peace. My phone buzzed again. It was Jack. This time the message was short. "Let's talk. You need to think this through." I sank back onto the couch, staring at the message. He was right. I needed to think this through. My mind was a battlefield of emotions, rage, betrayal, disgust, humiliation. But under all that, there was something else, something darker. The urge for revenge, yes, but also control. I wanted control again. Linda had ripped that away from me with every laugh, every moan in that disgusting video, and now I wanted to take it back. The idea of revenge felt intoxicating, like the only way to cleanse myself of the filth she'd dragged me through. But it wasn't just about Linda anymore. Those men, those faceless bastards, had touched what was mine. They had defiled her, and in doing so, they had defiled me. The humiliation wasn't just about her cheating. It was about how low she had gone, how far she had sunk. I couldn't just let that go, not without making them pay. I picked up my phone, dialing Jack's number. It rang twice before he picked up. "Alex," he said, his voice calm, professional. "We need to talk." "I know," I replied, my voice tight. "I've been thinking, and I'm not sure I want to let this go." There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost hear Jack weighing his words. "You need to be careful, Alex. This kind of anger can lead you down a path you can't come back from." "I don't care," I snapped, surprising myself with the venom in my voice. She humiliated me. She destroyed everything. I need something." "Revenge?" Jack asked, his tone neutral, but there was something behind it. "A warning, maybe? I get it. But revenge doesn't always go the way you think it will." "I don't want to think," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "I want to act." Silence filled the line. Then Jack spoke, slow and deliberate. "There are other ways, Alex. Think about what you really want." I leaned back, my chest heaving, eyes on the dark screen of my phone. What did I really want? So I hung up the phone and let the silence settle around me, but it felt heavy, almost suffocating. Jack's words echoed in my head. "There are other ways, Alex. Think about what you really want." What did I want? For the first time since that damned video, I had to confront the mess of emotion churning inside me. Revenge was the first thing that came to mind, but I wasn't stupid. Hiring a hitman, or even thinking about it seriously, could ruin everything. And not just Linda's life, my business. Hell, I'd end up in prison, and for what? A brief, twisted satisfaction. Would killing her or any of those men actually make me feel better? I wasn't sure anymore. I poured another glass of whiskey, swirling the amber liquid as I stared into it like it held answers. The thought of Linda with those men still burned in my chest, but now it was mixed with something else, sadness. How had we ended up here? When had everything between us fallen apart so completely? I wasn't blind to our problems. The distance, the lack of intimacy. But I never thought she'd go this far. I always assumed we'd figure it out eventually, get back on track like couples did after rough patches. I had no idea she'd been slipping away, searching for something I hadn't been giving her. But was that an excuse? Could that explain what I saw in that video? No, not a chance. She could have come to me, told me what she needed. Instead, she'd chosen to throw herself into that filthy motel bed with strangers. There was no coming back from that. The doorbell rang, startling me. I hadn't expected anyone, and for a moment, paranoia gripped me. Was it one of those men? Had Jack sent someone? I shoved the ridiculous thoughts aside and made my way to the door. It was Jack, standing there with that same unreadable expression on his face. He was a tall, lean man, his years of experience showing in his weathered features and sharp eyes. He didn't say anything at first, just nodded at me in a way that said he knew exactly what I was going through. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice low and calm. I stepped aside, letting him in. Jack was the kind of guy who didn't need to fill the silence with small talk. He walked in, took one look around my half-empty glass of whiskey, and sat down on the couch like he'd been here 100 times. "You're not the first man to go through this, Alex," he said, leaning back, his tone measured. "And you won't be the last." I sat across from him, feeling a strange mix of anger and relief. "Yeah, well, I don't care about other men's stories. This is my life, my marriage." Jack nodded slowly. "I get that, but you need to think about where this road leads. The moment you start considering violence, or worse, you're already losing." "Yeah, I feel like I've already lost," I muttered, staring at the floor. "Maybe, but there are ways to win, ways to come out on top without ruining your life. You just have to be smart." He paused, his gaze locking onto mine. "Do you want to destroy her, or do you want to control how this ends?" The question hit me hard, cutting through the fog of rage and hurt clouding my mind. Control. That's what I'd lost, and maybe, just maybe, I could take it back. "Tell me what you're thinking," I said, my voice barely a whisper. But there was something else behind it now, resolve. Jack leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "Good. Now let's talk about options." Jack's question hung in the air. Do you want to destroy her, or do you want to control how this ends? I couldn't shake it. The idea of taking back control felt like the one thing that made sense in the chaos. Destroying Linda, those men, sure, it was tempting. The anger in me craved that kind of scorched earth revenge. But there was another part of me, deeper and colder, that wanted something more than raw destruction. I wanted to be the one pulling the strings again. If I was going to deal with this, I needed to do it on my terms. Jack sat across from me, his dark eyes sharp, watching me work through my emotions in silence. He wasn't rushing me. He'd seen this before, men like me caught in the tidal wave of betrayal, unsure which way to swim. But Jack wasn't here to be my therapist. He was here to guide me through whatever decision I made. Okay, I finally said, leaning forward, tell me what you mean by options. What are we talking about here? Jack sat back, letting out a slow breath like he'd been waiting for me to ask. There's more than one way to ruin someone without ending up behind bars. You don't need a hitman to destroy her life, Alex. You need leverage. You need to control the narrative. I frowned, not fully grasping what he was suggesting. Leverage? You mean blackmail? Jack nodded slightly. In a way, yes, but more sophisticated. Think about it right now, you have the upper hand. You've got proof of her infidelity, and more importantly, she doesn't know that you know. You're holding all the cards, Alex. It's how you play them that matters. I rubbed my temples, the whiskey still clouding my mind, but not enough to drown out the flicker of understanding. And what exactly do I do with those cards? Jack leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. First, you don't rush into anything. Take your time. The moment you confront her, the game changes. She'll lie, cry, beg for forgiveness, whatever she thinks will work. But if you play this right, you can make her squirm, make her regret every decision she made. And those men? If you want, you can make sure they pay too. My heart pounded as Jack's words sank in. The idea of making Linda suffer, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, had a dark appeal. This wasn't about a quick flash of violence or some irrational outburst. This was methodical, calculated, control. How? I asked, my voice low. Jack's expression remained calm, focused. You start by gathering more evidence. I already gave you that video, but there's more to find. Track her movements, her finances, her phone calls. Make sure there's no doubt about how far this has gone. Once you've got everything, you decide what to do with it. You can use it in divorce court, or if you really want to twist the knife, you can leak it anonymously. Let the world see who she really is. Let her reputation burn. The thought sent a chill through me. I could see it so clearly. The perfect, composed Linda crumbling as the truth about her double life came out. But something still gnawed at me. And those guys, what about them? Jack's eyes darkened. That's where we can get creative. You don't have to do anything violent, but you can make sure their lives are just as miserable. Find out who they are, what they care about, and then rip it away from them. They're just as guilty as she is, and you can make sure they regret ever touching her. I sat there, staring at Jack, the plan unfolding in my mind. It was brutal, it was cold, and it was perfect. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt a sense of calm. All right, I said, my voice steady. Let's do it. Jack gave a slow nod. Good, now we start taking back control. The next few days passed in a blur, but not the kind of fog I'd been trapped in after watching that video. This was different. This was focused, calculated. I had purpose now. Every step I took was deliberate, every action part of a larger plan. Jack had laid out the blueprint, and I was following it, one cold, precise move at a time. First, it was about the details, digging deeper into Linda's life. She thought she was smart, keeping her secrets tucked away, but she had no idea how closely I was watching. I started with her phone. Jack had helped me install some software that allowed me to see her texts, track her calls, even follow her location. It was disturbingly easy. Within hours, I had access to every message she'd ever sent, every appointment she'd made that wasn't supposed to exist. As expected, she was still seeing them. There were no names saved, just numbers, but the messages left no doubt about who they were. She flirted, teased, planned her next rendezvous with those faceless men as if I didn't exist. It made me sick, but I forced myself to keep reading. Every detail was a weapon, and I needed all of them to win this war. I also tracked her financials, credit card transactions, hidden purchases, unexplained withdrawals. Jack's connections helped with that. Linda had been more reckless than I thought. Multiple hotel bookings, not just at that cheap motel, but other places too. Fancier places where she could pretend she was still the classy woman she portrayed herself to be. That hypocrisy hit me harder than I expected. She was living two lives, one as the perfect wife in our beautiful home, and another in these seedy, hidden corners of the world. It wasn't just the hotels either. There were gifts, expensive ones, lingerie, jewelry, even a watch. Who the hell was she buying these things for? Were these men actually receiving gifts from her? The woman I once thought I knew had turned into a stranger, someone capable of betrayal on a scale I hadn't even fully grasped yet. But it didn't end there. As I dug deeper, I realized Linda's betrayal went beyond just her affairs. She had been siphoning money from our joint accounts for months, slowly draining away funds that were meant for our future. She was preparing for something in escape, maybe, or some backup plan in case I found out. Well, I had found out, and she wasn't going to get away with it. In the evenings, I'd sit in the darkened living room, staring at the screen of my laptop as new pieces of information came in. Texts between her and those men, plans to meet, dirty promises exchanged in cheap language. Each message felt like another punch to the gut, but I wasn't about to let that stop me. I couldn't afford to be emotional now. This was all about control, about gathering enough evidence to make sure that when I made my move, it would be devastating. She'd have nowhere to hide, no excuses to make, and no ground to stand on. I'd strip her of everything: her dignity, her reputation, her security. And those men? I'd deal with them too. Jack had already started looking into them, finding out who they were, what they valued. Just like Linda, they had no idea what was coming. By the time I was done, they'd all regret crossing me. As the days passed, everything started falling into place, like pieces of a puzzle that were slowly forming a picture of Linda's betrayal. I had gathered more than enough evidence to make my move, but I wasn't in a hurry. That was the key to all of this patience. Jack's words echoed in my head: don't let your emotions rush you. The moment you confront her, you lose control. So I waited. I watched. I monitored her every move like a hunter waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Linda had no idea what was happening. She was still laughing, still pretending to live her life as if nothing was wrong. She'd smile at me during dinner, make casual conversation, and even touch my hand like she used to. But now it all felt like a sick performance, a charade that made my stomach churn. She was texting them again. Her lovers, one of them in particular, seemed to be her favorite. His messages were bold, disgusting even. He clearly had no respect for her, treating her like a toy to be used at his whim. And Linda, the woman I had loved for so long, responded eagerly. She made plans with him for another night at that same cheap motel, the one from the video that had shattered everything. My blood boiled as I read each word, but I kept my composure. This was what I needed. Some more proof, more leverage. Jack had found out who the men were, at least two of them. One was a married man, a mid-level executive at some faceless corporation. The other, a single sleazy real estate agent who seemed to pride himself on his conquests. They weren't just random guys she found in bars. They were people with lives, reputations, things they cared about. And soon, I would be holding their lives in my hands. I thought about their wives, their families. Did they know? Did they have any idea their husbands were sneaking off to screw around with mine? A part of me wanted to expose them right away, to let their worlds crumble as mine had. But I wasn't ready yet. The timing had to be perfect. Linda continued to siphon money from our accounts, thinking I wouldn't notice. But I tracked every penny, watching as she carefully funneled cash into a separate account under a fake name. She was planning something. Maybe she was getting ready to leave, or maybe she just wanted to have a safety net in case things blew up. Either way, it didn't matter. When I was done with her, she wouldn't have a dime to her name. I'd make sure of that. The more I uncovered, the more detached I became. I wasn't the Alex she knew anymore. I had shifted, hardened. I didn't feel sadness or regret, only a cold determination. I had the power now, and it was intoxicating. But I still needed to decide how to use it. Jack had offered me several options, each one more ruthless than the last. I could go public with everything, send the evidence to her family, her friends, her job, let everyone see who she really was. Or I could take the quiet route, ruin her financially, leave her with nothing, and force her to crawl back to me humiliated and broken. There was a part of me that wanted to see her suffer like that, to watch her crumble under the weight of her own choices. But there was another part, a darker part, that still whispered thoughts of revenge, not just on Linda, but on those men too. They had played their part in this, and they needed to pay. Jack had warned me about going too far, about letting my anger take over, but the temptation was growing stronger by the day. Whatever I decided, one thing was clear: when the time came, there would be no mercy. The moment was coming, and I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. Everything I'd been planning, everything I'd been waiting for, was about to unfold. The pieces were all lined up, and soon I'd make my move. But even as I sat there in the quiet of the house, the weight of what I was about to do started pressing down on me. I stared at my laptop, where the evidence of Linda's betrayal sat neatly categorized. Videos, texts, financial records, all of it pointed to a life she'd been living in the shadows. A life she thought she could hide. But I knew everything now. Every sordid detail. Linda had another rendezvous planned for the upcoming weekend. This time it wasn't at the seedy motel. No, she was stepping up her game. She'd booked a room at an upscale hotel downtown, somewhere she could pretend she was still the woman she portrayed to the world. The texts between her and her lover this time, it was the married executive, were filled with promises of a night she'd never forget. Well, she was right about that. She'd never forget it, but not for the reason she thought. Jack had already set things in motion. He'd hired someone to tail Linda that night to capture everything. It would be the final nail in the coffin. Photos, videos, proof that I could use to ruin her. The executive, too. I'd already drafted an anonymous letter to his wife with screenshots of the texts, photos of the hotel reservations, and an invitation to join me in watching her husband's downfall. But as I sat there staring at the screen, something shifted inside me. It wasn't hesitation, exactly. It was more of a realization. I had spent weeks, maybe months, planning this. I'd turned myself into a ghost, watching, waiting, letting my anger build until it consumed me. But now, on the brink of unleashing it all, I wondered what would come after. What would be left of me when this was over? Would I be free? Would I feel the satisfaction I craved, the closure I told myself I needed? Or would I be left with nothing but the hollow realization that revenge hadn't changed anything? I poured another glass of whiskey, staring at the amber liquid, the burn doing nothing to soften the edges of the rage, still simmering beneath the surface. I imagined the look on Linda's face when I confronted her, when I showed her everything I knew. Would she cry? Beg for forgiveness? Or would she defy me, standing tall even as her world crumbled around her? And then there were the men. Jack had tracked down the executive's wife, but he was still digging into the real estate agent's life. He'd been reckless, leaving a trail that Jack followed easily, and now we knew more about him than he probably knew about himself. Jack had asked me more than once if I wanted to do something about them, something permanent, but I wasn't sure anymore. They were pawns not worth the consequences that would come from going too far. I drained the glass and stood up. The house felt too quiet, too still. The weight of my plan sat heavily on my shoulders, but I wasn't backing down. I couldn't. This was about reclaiming control, about making sure Linda and those men never forgot what they'd done. But something told me that no matter what happened, I'd be changed too. The weekend arrived and everything was set in motion. I watched Linda leave the house, dressed in a way that would have made me proud, once sleek, confident, every inch the perfect wife. But now, seeing her like that, knowing where she was headed and who she was meeting, it only made my stomach churn. This wasn't my wife anymore. The woman walking out the door was a stranger, a liar, a cheat. And tonight she'd pay for all of it. I waited, pacing the length of the living room, phone in hand, as the hours crawled by. Jack was already at the hotel, his team in place. They would be in position to capture everything unseen. Linda thought she was in control, but she didn't know what was coming. The clock ticked on. I knew the moment had come when my phone buzzed. Jack's message was short. It's happening. Ready? Ready? I took a deep breath, my fingers trembling slightly as I typed back, yes, get it all. I sat back on the couch, staring at the phone, waiting for the inevitable. My heart was pounding, a mix of anticipation and dread swirling inside me. It was strange, this feeling of being both detached and deeply invested in what was about to unfold. I wanted to see it, needed to see it, but I also feared what it would mean when I did. Jack had promised to send me live updates, but I hadn't expected the first video so quickly. My phone buzzed again, and I swiped it open to see the scene Jack had captured. So she was Linda, laughing, her arm draped over the shoulder of the executive as they entered the hotel. They were all smiles, no shame, no guilt. To them, this was just another secret night, another thrill. But for me, it was the final betrayal. I watched as they made their way through the hotel lobby, oblivious to the fact that they were being filmed. Jack's team had done their job well, staying out of sight, capturing every detail. I felt a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. This was it. This was the proof I needed to destroy her. Another video came through this, one of them entering the hotel room. The door closed behind them, and I knew what would happen next. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to keep watching. I had to see it through. The plan wasn't complete until I had everything. Minutes passed and more videos arrived. Snippets of their night together, moments that would tear their lives apart once I was ready to use them. The satisfaction I'd felt earlier began to shift, though. As I watched Linda betray me again and again on that screen, the rage that had driven me all this time started to fade, replaced by something emptier. This was what I'd wanted: proof, revenge. But now that I had it, I didn't feel the closure I thought I would. I took another sip of whiskey, my hand shaking slightly. Was this enough? Would this destroy her the way I'd imagined? Or would it leave me as hollow, as the man I'd become in the process? Jack sent another message: we've got it all. What's your next move? I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the reply button. What was my next move? I had everything I needed to ruin her. to expose her for who she really was. I could send the footage to her friends, her family, her workplace. I could destroy the executive's marriage in a heartbeat. I could watch their lives burn, just like they'd burned mine. But now, standing at the edge, I wasn't sure if that was enough. For the first time, I hesitated. All this time, I had been driven by anger, by the need to take back control. But now that I had it, I felt empty. The revenge I'd craved didn't taste as sweet as I'd imagined. Linda would lose everything, but I had already lost more than I ever thought I could. I typed my reply slowly. Hold off. I need to think. Jack's response was quick. Take your time. But remember, you've got the power now. It's all in your hands. I put the phone down and looked around the empty house. The silence pressed in on me again, but this time it felt different. For months I had been consumed by rage, but now I realized that no matter what I did next, I was already broken. The real question wasn't about Linda or those men. It was about whether I could live with the man I'd become.